Hi, welcome once again to Senior Focus. I'm your host, Bill Adams. Senior Focus comes to you a couple times each month. We're a show designed for people over the age of about 60, but if you're under 60 or you care for people who are older, please feel free to join us for the next half hour. I want to thank Greg Roten from Channel 20 at Armstrong Cable for allowing us to come to your living rooms, and also to Keith Kaiser. Again, we're back in the museum area of the Fellows Riverside Gardens. It's actually the Davis Visitor Center, and if you haven't been out, all times of the year are really nice to visit and to learn more about the Metro Parks. Today we're going to talk with a budding author, a brand new author. Her name is Doreen Miner. Doreen, thanks for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah,
it's humbling. Thank you.
This is your first attempt at a book, and your book is going to be entitled I Live in Hope. And why don't we just talk about what gave you the idea of writing a book, since this is your first one, right?
This is my first one, yes. In January of 2006, my father was shoveling the driveway, and he fell and he broke his hip. And then he went through surgery, and when he came out of surgery, he was in second stage Alzheimer's, like that, immediately. So we had to really, get into Dad's world and deal with this, and it was very difficult. And during the summer, we were just about to put him in a care facility, and I was taking a writing class, and the professor said, I want you to write a poem of where you live at.
Okay.
And I said, well, right now I'm living in hope. And that was the poem that I wrote, and that started the whole book about Alzheimer's and my dad. And it's really a book about, it's inspiration. It's about those miracle moments that happen. And if you are lucid and if you're aware and you know they're going to happen, it just makes the road through Alzheimer's so much more, I wouldn't say easier, but it makes it better. It makes you a better person. Right.
That's the thing that really struck me about reading your material, your book, is that it's a very difficult subject, and there are probably thousands of people in Mahoning County that are caregivers at home with somebody with Alzheimer's, whether it's beginning or a little later advanced. And the wisdom, I guess, that you came up with through this experience, and I guess it's with your family. I mean, there's a lot with both your husband and your sisters, your mom.
My mom.
Yeah.
The grandkids.
Yeah. So it was this something that, that happened all at once, that, you were sort of, or was this a gradual awakening of some of the wisdom that came along? I imagine it didn't happen, at the very beginning. It must have been a real shock, right?
It was very hard, and it was very difficult, and I realized that, and I like to share that with people. And so I wanted to write a book that didn't talk about how difficult it is to care for someone with Alzheimer's, because if you're in it, you know that that's difficult. But there are some wonderful moments and wonderful gifts that you, as a caregiver, receive from the patient, from the person that has Alzheimer's. And the first chapter that I actually wrote when Dad was still alive. And Dad, he went into catastrophic fits, and those are fits that get the patient really angry. Something sets them off, and they might swear, they might throw things.
Right.
And he did a lot of this to Mom. And they usually do that to the person that they love the most.
Sure.
And so Mom, unfortunately, he loved her the most, so she got the most of his wrath. And one night my sister called, and Dad had left the house, and he wouldn't stay in the house anymore because it was poisoned. And that's very common with Alzheimer's patients.
Kind of a paranoia?
Very paranoid, yes. And Mom had this special spray, and she was spraying it everywhere. And so he wouldn't stay. First he tried to sleep on the floor.
Okay.
But it breaks your heart as you see that happening. And then he just left the house. He had a family meeting, and he said, girls, I just have to leave the house. So he slept at my sister's. He sat in our backyard in our cabana till we came home from work, and he stayed with us and ate dinner. And then he would go back to his house, but he'd stay outside in the garden. But then one night, I get this call from my sister. It's called An Unexpected Date. It's the first chapter.
Okay.
And she says, Dad wants us all over for dinner, and he wants us to bring Mom, too. And we were like, so we were a little afraid.
Right.
Because we really had to watch him around Mom. So we went, and it was the most wonderful evening. And we learned to just drop everything. And we really learned to live in the moments. And that's why I'm so grateful for Dad. He taught me. I always thought I did live in the moment.
Right.
But I was still on that gerbil wheel, running around.
Right.
But I was so focused on being with Dad and my family. And that was such a gift. And he's in the bathroom getting ready, slicking back his hair and getting ready for Mom and making her coffee. And so he still had that love, even though Alzheimer's, tried to take him in a different direction.
Right.
And, he kind of pushed his anger towards Mom. He still loved her.
Right.
Deep in his heart. You could see that in the picture. That's 3 months before Dad died. And there's just that love for Mom always.
But that has to be difficult, though, because it can turn very quickly. And, you're having good moments, I guess, and then all of a sudden they get very angry. And one of the things you discuss, and I know, and one of the funnier moments is when the interns from the doctor's office are trying to do the standard Alzheimer's test. And, I guess they're, again, that's why they're interns. They're brand new at this and they're learning. But you can't reason or try to argue with somebody with Alzheimer's. I mean, you have to sort of go to their world because, it's futile because they have an understanding at times that's completely different from what the reality is. But if you try to bring people and force them to say, no, it's this way, well, it's only going to be an argument, I guess.
And there's some simple examples, like one time Dad was eating pizza, and we were at the home, and I forget who was with me visiting, but Dad had eaten 3 pieces of pizza, and so Dad said, oh, that piece of pizza was good. And the other person said, no, Phil, you ate 3. And Dad said, no, I ate 1. And they went back and forth, and I thought, how simple, just to say, how was the 3 pieces?
Right, you want a 4th?
How were the 3 pieces of pizza, Dad? And just simple things like that, but some of it's really difficult. And I think I shared this story with you. I was driving to work. Dad was not in the home yet. We were getting him into the home, and we had to do a whole therapeutic lie to get him into the home. And I'll talk about therapeutic lying in a little bit.
Okay.
But I'm driving to work, and I pass the house. I always pass the house, and I see Dad in the driveway, and he's in the midst of a catastrophic fit. He's standing in front of Mom, so I speed down. I fly into the driveway, jump out of the car. Hi, guys, what's going on? I get in front of Mom, get her in the house, and Mom, lock the door.
Yeah.
So I look at Dad, and he's standing across from me, and I said, Dad, what's going on? And he said, your mother is cheating. Your mother is a prostitute. And you want to laugh. My mother's 78 Q's can be praise the rosary, every night.
Sure, yeah.
I'm not thinking she is one, but she, so I looked at Dad, and in my mind I'm thinking, okay, if I go against him, he's just going to go into a fit. And so I said, well, Dad, that could be a problem. And he said, yes, I think it is a problem. And he said, and then he broke my heart, and he said, do you think your mom was a good mom? And I always put the question back to Dad. I said, well, Dad, what do you think? He goes, oh, I think she was a great mom.
Yeah.
And I said, I do too, Dad. And then there was, and then he said, do you think she'll, come out of this? And I said, what do you think, Dad? And he said, I think she just might. And then little tears in his eyes, and I have a little tear in my eye, and then I see the watering can off to the side. So I just take it, and I said, would you like to go water your plants, Dad? And with Alzheimer's, he didn't remember.
Right.
They don't remember the catastrophic fits. You remember them.
Right.
And if you hold on to those can tear you apart. So it's really hard. You have to learn how to let those go.
Right.
And the way I did that was, Dad had the disease. I didn't have the disease.
Right.
Dad was the one that was in fractured time. He was the one that was, maybe present one moment and then back in the 1940s the next moment.
Sure.
I mean, how scary would that be?
Yeah, and so the redirection in that case, just, you said reflecting back and asking the same question, letting him kind of pause and respond, and then again, go on to gardening. And that's, where did you get those skills? I know we talked a little before the show, and you worked with the Alzheimer's Association, you want to talk a little bit about?
I basically got the skills from teaching for 29
Okay.
years because you think on your feet. So it was a lot of thinking on your feet. But then I went to the Alzheimer's Association and I went through every bit of information. They gave me a wonderful resource, the 36-hour day.
Okay.
And
That's a book, yeah.
yes, I think you're familiar with that. And that was my Bible. And it said, you could do two approaches. You could try to get the patient, it's a habilitative approach where you redirect them and you do that. Or you could try to reorient them. Well, if Dad says, mom's alive, his mom's alive, you keep telling Dad that she's dead. Every time you do that, he relives that. It's like the first time he's heard it. So in my mind, why would you do that,
Right, that's
to a patient?
stressful, yeah.
It's very stressful. So you say, oh, your mom's at the grocery store. And then 5 minutes later, short-term memory, they're not going to remember.
Right.
But it's very difficult to do. I'm natural at it because I had the experience, I really think, through teaching, because you think on your feet quite a bit.
Sure.
And but it can be learned. And once you learn it, it makes your life so much easier, and you get to see those miracle moments.
Well, a lot of the moments, it seemed, revolved around food.
Yes.
And maybe the family dinner table
Yes.
and preparing food. Do
Yes.
you want to talk about, some of your stories about, what happened with that?
The food, the
Yeah.
zucchini and soup day. That was, Dad called, my husband's a fabulous cook, and I want to thank him personally for that, because I never have to cook a day in my life.
That's Ed?
That's my husband, Ed, yes.
Okay.
And zucchini and soup day, Dad calls, and he says, what's for lunch, Dora? So I opened the refrigerator, there's a big bowl of soup and a zucchini. And I'm like, oh, Dad, we have zucchini and soup. Oh, I love to fry zucchini. So I made the soup, and then Dad wants to fry the zucchini. And another really important thing with patients with Alzheimer's, you have to let them be as dependent as they can be.
Or independent, you mean?
Okay. I'm sorry, as independent as they can be. Because if if they depend on you for everything, they get angry because they're losing their ability to do things.
Sure.
So Dad was frying the zucchini. I was standing right next to him, just by the stove. And he was doing it in the wrong order, and I could have told him.
Yeah.
But I didn't. I just let him make it. It was the most delicious zucchini that I've ever had. Because Dad, could still make it.
Oh, sure.
And then he would wash the dishes, and he'd wash one at a time. And it would take probably 45 minutes to get my dishes washed. But I never rushed him, ever. Because that was he was staying independent.
Sure.
And that's a good thing. So you try that as much as you can.
Now, there are times, though, where you have to, at a certain point, say some activities can't continue, like the driving.
The driving was a big issue. And, and in the 36-hour day, they say that they will eventually forget about driving their car. My father never forgot about driving that car. That was a real sore point with him. And the one chapter, funny you brought that up, I'm writing it now, it's called Meltdown. So my father is over at my sister's for dinner. I used to take him Saturdays, and then my sister took him on Sundays for dinner.
Okay.
So he's over at my sister's, they have a beautiful dinner. Something set him off. He had a popcorn container, he just threw it at Mom.
Oh, boy.
So we get Mom out of the house. My sister can't, bring him down, so she calls me. I come over, it breaks my heart, and he's on the couch and he's just crying. And he says, I can't take this anymore. I can't put the family through this. So he's very aware that something is really different. But he just, he was just so upset that he was putting the family in. He always used to say, you're in cahoots. You're all in cahoots with us.
Oh, boy.
And so I did. I got him out, and we went for ice cream. And we're in the parking lot, and he wants his car back. And he says, Dora, I want my car back. I said, okay, Dad. I said, we'll bring it back. He goes, you will? I said, yes, I will. I'll bring it back. I said, but there's one thing. If I bring it back, you have to understand. Now, my mom came up every day to feed Dad.
Okay.
He wouldn't eat her food at home. But once he got to the home, they were poisoning his food.
Oh, okay, so it switched, yeah.
So it switched. So Mom came up and brought his food. And I'm in the car with Dad, and I said, if we bring the car, which I will, Dad, I said, Mom won't be able to come and bring you food. Oh, maybe I better let her keep it. So I just, it was just those on the spot, thinking, but letting him still have that independence of, yes, you can have your car. But that was the hardest thing with Dad.
Sure.
And,
Now, you did describe at some point that you had him family meeting about, and we just had Attorney Elliot Ligo on about advanced directives and elder law planning and elder planning.
Fiduciary, yeah,
Right.
all that stuff, yeah.
And
Where's the-
how did that work for you? Do you want to talk about maybe some things that people should think about, or how, you know, how that process works in real life?
My sister, I ran to the Alzheimer's Association the first thing, and my sister had contacts with lawyers, so she got the ball rolling, and we got the fiduciary powers of attorney and the health powers of attorney. And we were so afraid, and the chapter, I think it's called Friends Till the End, we were so afraid to do that with Dad because he really thought Mom was at fault, but that was kind of to our advantage because he was wiping her off his map, his legal map. So he wanted her off everything. So we sat around the table and we did get the lawyers to, you know, give us all the power. And he talked to his friend, and his friend said, yes, Phil, this is a good thing to do. And then right after that, about a month, we put him in the home. And he would never talk to his friend again.
Oh, boy.
So, you know, those were some difficult things. But there are elder law attorneys that people can contact and that are very helpful. I went to a couple groups where, I can't remember her name, but she was speaking about the elder law. And it's very specific, so it's specific to that disease, and they help out quite a bit.
Right. Now, he was active, though, you know, even though he had Alzheimer's. I know there's one chapter where you go bowling.
Back on the alley.
Well, I mean, but that's his, I mean, that was one of his big things for years, right? I mean, he was actually, you said he could have been a professional bowler. He was that good.
It was that good, yeah. I'll just read the last
sure.
part of it. I wasn't present for this miracle moment, but my sister told me about it. And at that point, Dad was kind of, you know, had the shuffle, the Alzheimer's shuffle, and he was slumped over, and it was kind of hard for him to walk. But they take him bowling, and that's how Mom and Dad met, on the bowling alley.
Wow, yeah.
So he's back, and he wanted Mom to come. So he's back, he's high-fiving her, you know, when he gets the strikes and the spares. And this is just a little snippet of back on the alley. On Dad's final day of bowling, no trumpets blared, no cameras flashed, no reporters recorded the unimaginable. But family members knew that this was Dad's greatest triumph. Almost every ball that Dad threw landed right in the pocket. Shattered pins flew in every direction. Strikes, spares, and Dad's incredible spirit graced the lanes. And when the games were over, the alleys were positioned in a silent salute as Dad shuffled out the door. So that was, you know, one of those great miracle moments to witness. I didn't get to see it, but my sister told me about it.
Yeah, and you know, again, this all goes back to the way you, I guess, look at things and experience things. You were talking about a little earlier about how we are all in a very fast-paced lifestyle, and to the point where sometimes we don't eat together, we don't have dinner together. We're always, like with children, you're shuffling them off to activities and things, and how that was just sort of the way of life and that you experienced, and most of us do. But this has really, again, brought you into more of a focus on the individual moment, the current moment, and really appreciating that, right?
It stopped us dead in our tracks because Dad, like I said, he came over every Saturday for dinners. And we would my husband cooks like 6 things on the weekend, and we just microwave it. We'll sit down together, but it's just real fast-paced.
Right.
And Dad would come over, and, you know, he would smell the mushrooms cooking, and he would go by the stove, and he would, you know, just those smells. And every time I smelled those smells, I still, you know, think of Dad. We'd go into the formal dining room, and Dad would sit at the head table, and, you know, we'd have to wait, you know, for, you know, someone to come in, and Dad didn't have the patience, but Ed was outside, and he waited for Ed to come in, and then he usually says, we're Catholic, so he says the Catholic prayer, but he goes off in this free verse prayer, you know, blessing everybody and thanking everybody for taking care of him. And it was just one of those moments where, you know, it wouldn't have happened if we didn't have, you know, this experience. So I was so grateful for those experiences because time's delusional mask was removed and I learned how to stand still in those moments. So I'm not grateful that my father had Alzheimer's, but I'm very grateful for what I learned, you know, through this journey.
Well, and part of this is sharing all of these experiences. And again, you described how you got started through the writing class. Have you been back to that writing class to share some of these things, or how, are you doing this with your family? Are you sharing your chapters as you write them? I guess, what's the process been like in writing the book?
To get it out,
Yeah.
I share them with different people. In fact, when I went back to school, people know I'm writing my book, so when they have a situation, I send them chapters, I share it with them. I took a class from Dr. C.J. Lear a couple summers ago. In the past 2 years, I've really been focused on the book. I mean, I wrote a few chapters after Dad died, but I really have been focused on the prospectus and then writing the chapters and the platform. This is building your platform so people know that it's out there. So I was at the class, at CJ's class, and after class, I just read her one of my chapters, and she said, "Oh, would you share that and come in?" So I go into her classes and share. And one girl, she emailed me, and she said, "Could I have your little poem?" It really wasn't a poem, it was my wisdom on hope. And her sister's son was really sick. He had so many transplants, and he was getting another one. And she typed it up, and she put it in a frame, and her sister read it every day. And that, even though you're not published, I just believe a writer is one who writes. And when you share just maybe with one person, you're still helping that one person. And now I also am in a writers group, so we meet every other Wednesday. There's 4 of us, and I'm writing nonfiction. The other 3 are writing fiction. So we share our writing. We write for like 2 hours, and then we share our writing back and forth.
Where's that writing group meet? Is that
we meet at houses. It's through friends.
Okay, it's a local?
It's local.
And then the other class is that through Youngstown State?
Dr. Lear, she went through Muskingum University.
Okay.
But it was right in Youngstown, I think at the Comfort Inn or something, right in Austintown, yes.
So what are your plans for the book as you, again, I haven't written the book, but what are your thoughts of, are you looking to go to publishers now, or are you going to self-publish this? Do you know what the future holds for that?
I'm looking to go through an agent, and then they'll contact publishers. I'd like to try that route first. But first I have to build my platform. I have to let people know that this is here and that this is helpful and inspirational. And I look at some of the books I read, like Tuesdays with Morrie, Mitch Albom. I mean, you just see people that are in a really difficult, desperate situation. They can take that situation and make the best of it. Not just make the best of it, find joy in it. And that's what this book is about. So my audience is geared toward people that are taking care of Alzheimer's patients, but it also is inspirational for anyone that's going through any difficult time. Yes.
Are there some we have a few minutes to go, there other snippets that you wanted to refer to, or
my dad was just a big time gardener, so every time he came over, I think we spent, I don't know, $700 on plants that in the spring, just to get him to, and he would plant, and he would go back into that moment, and he would just be himself. So there are some other moments that I'd like to share, but to get back to that redirecting, just really quickly, Dad was planting, and there were ants like all around him, and he stood up and he thought the ants were everywhere on him, and there weren't. There wasn't an ant on him. So I could have said, "Dad, there's nothing on you," but I didn't. I said, "Oh, go up to the garage. Eddie has some special spray," and it was that Cutter mosquito spray. And my dad was ripping everything off. He's spraying himself, and then he went, "Oh, okay, they're gone."
Right.
But to an Alzheimer's patient, it seems so real. So I always kept that in perspective, that it was very real to my dad. So to tell him it wasn't, was...
Yeah, it wouldn't be productive at all. Yeah.
Right, but this is a beautiful story about the gardener comes home. He was at our house, and he saw my husband's garlic outside. And before he went into the home, he had planted garlic in his garden. So all of a sudden, he wants to go back to his home, which he hadn't been to, for months, and not go inside, but just go to the garden and check his garlic out. Well, my husband planted this garden for my husband, for my father, and this is just the last part of it. After cutting Mom and Dad's grass one day, Eddie planted a magical garden. He wasn't sure of how Dad situated everything in his garden, but the garden knew. Tomato and pepper plants graced the same rows as always. The zucchini plant was stationed off to the side as the cucumbers gently climbed the wire fence on the outer rim. A patch of tender leaf lettuce nestled the far right corner, It seemed as if Dad had never left. The garden was growing and thriving and looking exactly the same as if Dad had tenderly planted each vegetable himself. Mom, of course, watered the garden faithfully, and Ed kept a close eye as the garden flourished and waited for its caretaker to come home. And finally, Dad knew the secret, and the garden's wait was over. With Alzheimer's, we weren't quite sure how Dad would react. Would he appreciate this intrusion into his sacred space? Would he be hurt that we hadn't asked him to help? We didn't know. But what I did know at that moment was Dad was beginning the descent down the garden path, and I carefully, cautiously tried to prepare him for the magic. But magic doesn't need an introduction. It sparkles and it shines, all on its own. However, I did casually tell Dad that Eddie had a surprise for him and put in some extra plants. And Dad would have a garden, and Dad replied, "Oh, that's nice." And then he was face to face with his garden. He stood still, mesmerized by what he saw. "Oh, my heavens," Dad exclaimed. "Look at that cabbage. Oh, the tomato plants are wonderful. I'm going to have a heck of a lot of tomatoes this year." Then he carefully entered the garden. He examined each specimen, pulled weeds, pruned the excess leaves, and asked for his Severin powder. With trowel dipped ever so gently in that bag of Severin, Dad lightly sprinkled each plant as if he were putting powdered sugar toppings on a cake. First, he started with the cabbage and ended with the zucchini. And when he finished, every plant had that special frosty white protectant so no insect would disturb the foliage. Dad stepped back and was quite pleased. And then we got to see, we just sat there for 2 hours. And we watched, those are the moments. You know, and he was himself. He was back in the garden. We didn't talk to him. We just sat back, Mom and I, and watched.
And enjoyed. Well, thank you very much, Doreen. That, again, is a snippet from I Live in Hope, which is Doreen Miner's new book, her first book. And we look forward to when it'll be published and out available. Of course, you'll be in the area, I'm sure, to
Yes, I do too. Yes, I look forward to, and thank you so much for having me on the show. I appreciate it.
Well, I really appreciate your sharing that story. And again, it's a story of hope and triumph in the face of very difficult circumstances of Alzheimer's disease. And again, you've been watching Senior Focus. My name is Bill Adams. I'm your host. We want to thank Greg Roten from Channel 20 at Armstrong, and also Keith Kaiser from Mill Creek Metro Parks for allowing us the use of Davis Visitor Center to bring the show to you. And thank you most of all to you for watching, and we'll see you next time.